Welcome to Career Pro Tips by Life in the Green Room. Life in the Green Room is all about helping busy professionals who want more from their career. We provide action-oriented, tool-based plans and programs to help you take action and start driving your career where you want to go. Career Pro Tips is a weekly video series where we dive into one specific topic or question and give you strategies, tactics, and tips that you can apply right away if that's a topic that's really relevant to you. My name is Heather Green McGlynn, and I'm the Vice President of Marketing at a Fortune 500 company. I have used these tips and strategies, and I have seen my peers, my colleagues, and my team use them. I know that they will help you start taking ownership of your career. Welcome to episode number 37 of Career Pro Tips. This week, we are going to talk all about categorizing your work. So in episode number 35, I talked all about how I planned for my week. But in this episode, I'm going to talk about how I actually think about that work and structure that work. And what really helps me is this categorization. I put all of my work into 4 different categories, which I'm going to review with you today. And it's important for me to do that because it helps me bucket them, helps me group them, it helps me make sure I have balance, that I'm getting all of the right things done. Not all of the things done, all of the right things done. I really am in the camp of it's almost impossible to get everything done. So how do you make sure you're getting the right things done? This categorization of my work really helps me, so I can't wait to share it with you today. There are 4 buckets that I categorize all of my work into. They are doing work, thinking work, interacting work, and admin work. Doing, thinking, interacting, admin. So I'm going to go through how each of those 4 buckets work and how I think about them. I can tell you right out of the gate that I really feel comfortable in the doing and in the thinking. That's where I want to spend all of my time. And so I really have to bucket them so I make sure I don't forget about interacting, and the admin stuff has to be done, so I can't just ignore that. So first, let's talk about how I define doing. So doing is work that might take time, it might be a little intense, but it's really just you're doing work that you already know how to do. It just needs to get done. So an example might be a really deep analysis. You know how to do the pivot tables, you know how to pull the data. It's just work you have to get done. And this is the stuff that kind of runs the business all the time, is the doing. So I like to think about doing in terms of things that is really, it's important. It's usually not urgent, but it's usually not stuff that's going to completely move the needle. It's just part of kind of the trains running on time type of analogy that I like to use. I'm sure my team gets sick of it all the time. So even under doing, I want to give you guys a few things to think about. So if you have a report that you do every single week and it's pretty consistent, you know how to do it, the doing piece is the heads down work where you're really focusing on it and you're really trying to get it done. I want you to make sure that even in your doing, you're not becoming a robot. You are being paid to think. So if you have the same report that you do every week and you send to your boss, and usually it shows $1 million of sales or $1 million of inventory or whatever, and one week you send it off and it's only showing $10,000 and you didn't catch that, that is totally on you, and you are not doing your work. You missed it. Like, your job is not just to go through the steps in a heads down manner, but it's to look at it and make sure it makes sense. Before you ever sent a report that was off by that much, you should have said, is there something wrong with my data? Were we closed all week last week? Like, what's going on that all of a sudden something that very consistently I saw looks different? That's kind of baseline of doing. If you are just putting your heads down and you're not even reviewing it, the real, honest, brutal truth is that job can be automated or outsourced. So be sure that even in your doing side, you are not becoming methodical or robotic or something that really shouldn't be required of a high cost resource. So in your doing, your first absolute baseline expectation is that you're doing the work and you're also making sure it passes the logic test. Like, this is the general how much I see in the report that I do every week. The next level of doing is saying, wow, this analysis that I'm doing, what's something else that I could use? What other way could I use the data to find value for the company? So should I look at it another angle and say, well, look, we normally saw sales, but maybe I break it down by region, or maybe I break it down by the type of product. Is there another way we could cut the data that shows insights to the company? That's really taking the doing work to the next level, maybe dipping your toe into the thinking side. But I really implore you to make sure your doing is always in the doing plus logic and the doing plus value add space, because that's your sweet spot. That's what you're being paid to do. The second bucket, we went through doing, the second bucket is thinking. These are the two that I like to live in. And the thinking bucket is, what is the change you're trying to drive? What is the strategies you're trying to employ? What is the trends in the market? What is going on that you need to be putting some actual thought and driving change behind? This work will never get done if you don't make time for it. In episode 35, I talked about blocking off time. I absolutely block off time when I have a big issue I want to think about or a big strategy I want to map out, because if not, you can always be busy doing and you don't actually get the impactful work that needs done. I talked about doing the right work. Making sure you're having time for the thinking work is really important. So figure out where you're trying to drive change in your area and do some thinking work about new ways to look at it, new trends, new research, all of that. And schedule that into your day. And even if you have a really full, busy schedule with everything else that you normally do, I would find time to do this, because this is really what is going to make you valuable to the company. It's going to help drive change. It's going to develop you as a professional. There's a lot of great things that happen in this thinking bucket. If you have ever heard of the matrix, the urgent versus important matrix, where it talks about urgent work that usually gets done above everything else, and then urgent and important work gets done, and then sometimes work that's important just never, people don't get to it. They get stuck on all this urgent and unimportant, urgent and important. All that is taking up all of the time, and you don't get the actual important work done. Your job as a leader, as somebody who's trying to own your career, is to make sure you make time for this work. So schedule it, figure out what it is for you, and go after it. So we've talked about doing, we've talked about thinking. The third one is interacting. And this is the one I need to remind myself of. When I took this new role a couple of months ago, I attended a training that was based on the First 90 Days book. And the training was good. It talked about making sure you knew what you were going to do and setting the strategy and learning your team, all good things. But the piece that hit me, that stuck with me in that training, that hit me over the head like a 2x4, was that interacting, especially when you don't know your team that well, is part of your job. Literally smacks me on the head. Because I'll tell you, I'd rather not do this. I know that sounds terrible, but I like to get work done. I like to move the needle. I like to do the thinking work. I don't like to interact. Oh, I know it sounds like a terrible person. I don't like to spend the time chit-chatting or going to dinner with colleagues or suppliers or vendors, partners, my team, any of it. I don't know why. It's not like I don't enjoy it. I enjoy conversation. I'm generally not horribly awkward in social situations. I think maybe it's because I'm a working mama and I'd rather spend my evenings with my family or on something that I choose. But that statement was worth the day and a half training that I went to, because it was like, okay, man, you have got to make time for interacting. You've got to make time for getting to know your colleagues. It is not a waste of time at all. And I had to make that switch in my brain to understand that knowing my colleagues and my peers and my team is going to help me get things done more effectively, more efficiently. If I know what's driving them, I can make sure we're on the same page. I can make sure we do. It's almost like that expression, go slow to go fast. Building those relationships can really help you accelerate down the road and make sure that you're on the same team as a business. So many times people run into issues in companies because they're in silos. And one way to break down those silos is to actually have relationships and interactions with your peers and your teammate. So for me, interacting is one I work hard on every day. It's also could not be more important for me because most of my team does not sit in the office in the city where I'm located. Most of them are in 2 other cities. So that means I'm on video conferencing all the time. I'm on phone calls all the time. If I don't take the time during those calls and when I do travel to build a rapport, it makes it really tough to be effective in this role. So I want you to remember that interacting is part of your job, and it is part that can really develop. You know those people who are good networkers. There is a reason that they're successful. And so incorporate that into what makes you a successful professional. So think about interacting. The other thing I like to think about for this is I would love to go back maybe someday and take my introvert extrovert test, because a long time ago I came back as an extrovert. So that would make me think I should love interacting and dinners and all these things. So I don't know if I've shifted or if it's just that the introversion, extroversion gene in me is not as high as my desire to try to be productive. I don't know. It's really something that puzzles me. The fourth and final kind of work that you have to do is admin work. You absolutely cannot get rid of this work. So how do you do it in the most efficient way possible? And these are things like answering quick emails, booking your travel, doing expense reports, paying invoices, approving quotes, paying your bills personally, all of those things that are not really moving the needle, but they have to get done. In my mind, I try to do these in the most productive and efficient way possible. So the tips I have for you to think about there is, how do you automate them? So how do you make sure that all your bills are on auto pay? And the other big tip I have is, how do you batch them? So how do you group it together and say, all right, I'm going to spend the next hour and I'm just going to power through all of these administrative tasks and get them done. Gretchen Rubin, she talks a lot about power hour. I like to have a specific admin power hour where I save them all up. I got to call and make this doctor's appointment. I have to call this supplier. This email needs responded to, but it's not like it's a very thought-provoking email. I put them all together and I try to get through all of them as quickly and efficiently as possible so I can get back to the other work that is more valuable to the company, more valuable to me, more valuable as a professional. The doing, the thinking, and the interacting. So that is how I categorize my work. And I will tell you, in my planner, I literally go down the list of things I'm trying to get done, and I will write beside it, oh, is this a D for doing, T for thinking? I actually look at it that way, so then I'm like, oh, you've got 4 admin things on your list today and you have 2 for tomorrow. Let's pull them all together and get them done at once. Or, oh, you've got a bunch of D's in there. Okay, how are we going to do this work in the most productive way possible in the right priority order so you're getting the right work done? That's how I think about categorizing my work. I would love to hear what you think about this. Do you have other ways you categorize it? Have you ever thought about this before? Let me know, because I am excited about this new thing. I've really only started it about 6 months ago when I got hit over the head with the interacting as a new is part of your job. So how are you doing this, and what do you think about it? Leave me a note here. And until next week, here's to owning your career journey.